Hi, welcome to the online user group Work Smarter, Not Harder, dealing with the membership side. So what do we mean when we say working smarter, not harder? Basically, we're talking about being more efficient. So is there anything that we can do to trim the amount of time we're investing in generating the results that we need to get, but still getting the high quality of results that we need? So you need to constantly question how you're spending your time. Is there a better way of doing this? Is there another way I can get this information without investing as much time into it? And we've come up with three basic questions or topics to help you with that. So first of all, we're using all the resources that are available to us. Is there any way to avoid potential rework? So duplication of input, repeating the same information in multiple places, that type of thing. And setting the priorities for what needs to be done. So for resources, it may be resources that you're just not aware are there or that you're not utilizing to their fullest. Um, Example, using 2 hours to manually input information to Excel to generate a report when you might be able to get the same information directly from a report generator in Jonas. Rework, again, trying to eliminate that aspect where we've got someone inputting information into an Excel sheet, giving it to someone else to manipulate that information, then giving it to a third person to punch into Jonas to be able to post to the members' accounts, for instance. That's basically every time there's a rework or manual input, you're opening it up for human error to creep in and then creating more work for you to have to double check the information before it actually gets posted in. And then prioritizing. So what is stuff that I can prioritize or stuff that probably I can redelegate to somebody else to do because it doesn't make any sense for me to be doing this stuff when it really is stuff that the, say, food and beverage or the accounting side or pro shop should be setting. So some of the things we're going to look at is the ability to track prospective members, member changes, so membership account changes, reporting and storing member information, and changing membership types. So talking about prospective members, one of the things you can do is use the guest database. Every Jonas system comes with two databases, the membership database and the guest database. If you're using our spa booking module, court booking module, tea time management, you're probably already using the guest database because when you set up a new guest in one of those bookings, it actually automatically populates it to the guest database. Now, the idea is that the guest database is completely separate from the membership database, so that's not cluttering it up our member database with fake members. So one of the things you can do if you have prospective new members is to set them up in the guest database, which still has the ability to do custom information, uh, allows you to do communication tracking and other key information like addresses, business information. And then basically once they're approved or become a full-fledged member, you can copy all that information directly from the guest database into the member database, and it brings all of that with it. So it brings all the information you filled in, plus any communication tracking that you have already entered in. So basically, under the convert member to guest setting, you just have to tell it the linkage of the two types of statuses. So basically, there's going to be a prospective or a guest status for the guest database. And then when you move them over to an active membership, what do you want it to default to? You can always change it when you move them into the member database. It's just what's the default. And then you can map the specific custom fields, because you may have fields set up on the guest database for custom information that you don't necessarily need in the membership side. So you can actually map it and say, I want these 3 to be carried over into the member database, but the other ones, I don't need them to be brought over. And then basically from the guest database, once they've been approved, you can just click on the right convert to member. And it will basically move everything over to the member database. So under club management, so this is your custom information, and then this is the screen we were just looking at, which is the linkage between the two. And then what information do I want to come over from the custom information screen? Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is tracking or making changes to the member account setup for existing members. So one of the key features that we have is something called a future billing function. And then there are a couple of logs and reports you can use for tracking what's happened with those members. Now, the future fee billing can be a very useful tool, because basically what it does is allows you to preset a change to the status or fee schedule or both at a future point. Can be used, obviously, the most simplistic one would be if your fee schedules are, let's say, linked to age of member. So there's a junior membership category, there's an intermediate, and there's a senior. So when I set a new member up, and when they turn 65, they're going to automatically switch to the senior membership. I can basically, when I set them up today, set a future date when they're going to be 65 and tell the system, on this date, I want you to switch their fee schedule from dues intermediate to dues senior. Now the key is, if you're going to use the future billing, you need to make sure that you run, as part of your month end, the future billing changes report. If you have Silent Partner, you can set it up to run automatically, but if not, it just has to be part of your monthly routine. Now that future billing can be used for other things as well. For instance, one thing we may run into is for that new member, maybe for the first year, I've decided to give them a discount on their dues. So I set this member up with the full golf, family golf, which is $5,300 in my case, but I'm going to say that we're going to give them a 25% discount, but only for the first year. So what I can do is, when I set them up initially in the system, I set them up with their 25% discount, but then I can go into future billing and tell it, oops, that as of this time next year, oops, their status will remain the same, but I want to change their dues back to family full, but set the discount to 0. So basically now the system knows that on that date in the future, I'm going to just keep this the same, but get rid of that 25 completely. It could also be used, for instance, for leave of absences, where you want to temporarily convert it. So you can set that this is when they're going to go on leave of absence, and then another future billing record that says this is when they're going to be reinstated. Now, as we said, the key is that if you are using future billing, you need to get into the habit of always running the future fee billing changes report each month. Now, basically that will look at, it'll list all the changes that are due to happen up to that date. gives you a chance to preview them, and if you're okay with them, you say proceed, and it'll just go ahead and make the changes for you. Now, tracking the actual changes, we have edit logs. So there's an edit log right underneath each member's record, but then there's a global report under reports that will do all the membership. So if I want to track every change that's been made to every single member through a specific date range, I can run it through reports, club management reports, member edit log, which basically will track every change that's been made. It shows you the field that was changed, what it was, and what it was changed to. So under reports, member edit log. Now, as I said, there is also one right under the member itself. So if I don't want to look at it for everyone, I'm just tracing what's happened with that one member. In the member record, that edit log is there as well, which basically tracks every change that was made. The next one is we have a new report built in, which is a member tracking / count report. Now, it's called that because some clubs used to have do it manually, what they used to call a ticking report. Now, the member count report is straightforward. It tells you this is how many members, and it can be based on their fee schedule or on the status if you're doing it by status. The tracking one is basically going to do a comparison and say from this date, which is your start date, to this date, the end date, you had these many, say, intermediate members and these many social members. And what happened was 2 of the intermediates went to social, 1 intermediate resigned, and 1 social went to intermediate. So it's basically tracking the what's happening with your membership. You know, are they moving up in classes? Are they moving down in classification? Are they leaving? Those tracking reports can be run for any date range. They can do a 1 year or 5 year history on it as well. So basically you can tell it to give it just by the status or just by the category or by all 3. Now, as for tracking this information or storing member information, we give you 3 potential places where you can track extra information about the member. One is the custom member fields. And then communication tracking, which a lot of people aren't even aware is there. They just haven't used it much. It's being used a lot for tracking issues or just notes about the member. And then member checklists. From the custom fields, you basically have 300 fields that you can design to track information. Now, when you're setting up these custom member fields, it's basically you're just asking for what the label is going to be on the field and then the type. Now, when you're in that type field, if you hit F2, you see a lot of different types. Basically, there's only 3 of those you're ever going to use. There's alphanumeric or text, which means it's a text field where someone's going to type something in. It's going to be D for date, which means I want them to plug in a specific date. And then it's going to be yes or no, where it's an actual checkbox that they tick to say yes or uncheck for no. The pick list, instead of just being a text box for someone to write something in, means that I can actually set up a preset list that they pick from rather than just an open field. All of these can be set up and reported on, and they can be used to condition reports. So basically, give me everyone who has this particular flag in this field or has this information in that field. So when you go into club setup, custom member information, so this is one that I normally set up with new clients automatically. Very first thing we do. So I basically just call it reset for resignation. I set it to alphanumeric because I want it to be a text field. And I can set it to any length I want. I just arbitrarily pick 40. Now you're fine leaving it as that because then obviously when someone is set to resign, I can go in and plug in why they've resigned. The only problem with leaving it as a text field is if I want to run a report at the end of the year for all the people who resigned and why they resigned, even something as simple as people moving, I can get different results, right? Because someone might type in moved to California. Someone else might say relocated out of state. Someone else might say left town. So trying to get a meaningful report kind of gets a lot more tricky. But then what I can do is set up this field, but then pick list and dictate, but these are the only reasons you can hit. So you can't type randomly anything in there. You actually need to pick from one of these options. Now, when you're setting up a pick list, we don't use the description. So it's whatever you type in here is what they will see and what the system reports on. So and you dictate what those are. But then now that becomes a very handy tool because end of the year I can run a report. Give me everyone with a resignation date this year and sort by the reason they resigned. So I can get a listing and see why are people resigning. Is it because most of my people it's because they've moved? Well, I have no control over that. My second biggest group is because let's say there were too many tournaments they couldn't get tee times. Okay, well that's something we can address and help solve for them. Now the other one we have is this communication tracking. So it's linked, as we said earlier, to the guest database as well as the member database. And it can be used just for a note field where you can basically type in, on this date, this person requested copies of their POS chits, which we then email to them. Straightforward note. But what you can also do is set up a task. And if you're setting up a task and the club uses Outlook, you can actually, when you assign the task to a Jonas user, if that user has an Outlook access, the system can automatically email them an Outlook task and calendar function, which would populate to their Outlook automatically. The other thing you can do is you can actually tell the system, give it an email address to be notified when they flag that task as complete. The person can be emailed that, hey, the person you assigned it to has now defined that communication or that task as complete. If you're going to use that, the other thing you can do is under the user's preferences, there's a little flag that says show the task. So if I'm going to be assigning tasks to users, I probably want to go in and flag this for those users. So when they sign into Jonas each day, it comes up with a list of stuff that's been attached or assigned to them for their tasks. And then basically when they sign in, this screen would pop up showing them any tasks that have been assigned to them. And they can actually go in and access the task, make changes to it, add information to it, whatever they like. Now, the other thing we've added in is something called a checklist. Now, the checklist is set up very much like the custom member information. It's a label, a type, and the size. And the types are exactly the same. It's D for date, Y for yes or no checkbox, and A for an alphanumeric, just a text field where I can put in information. The big difference between custom fields and the checklist is when you set up a custom field, it's available to every single member. It flows across and it shows up on every single member. A checklist, the checklist can be assigned to specific members. So, for instance, you may have a checklist for new members. So you may want to, for a new member, assign the new member checklist, which might be, have they come in and met the GM? Have they come in for their, free first dinner and to be given a tour of the club? And, have they given us the bank information for their ACH? That type of thing. Remember, it's different than the custom fields because it's only going to show up on that particular member that you've linked the checklist to. You can, as well as the custom member fields, report on these fields just as you would from any other field on the member file. Now, the membership type changes. There's a couple of ones that you have that allows you to do member status changes or dues category activity changes. Now, obviously, if you're using future billing, then you really don't need this because the future billing will deal with this for you. But if you're not using future billing, this is a way of doing it, again, automatically for a group of members. Using the same example, members who turn 25 or 65 need to switch from intermediate to senior, let's say. The key is that these two global changes are keyed to a report generator. So you have to design a report in the club report generator conditioned to only pull out those members who are going to be over 65 or over 25, whatever your criteria is. So in our example, we're looking for anyone who's going to be over 25, but is still in the junior category. Now, the key for these two programs to make the changes is you have to tell the report to keep the information so it can be used in these. Now, what it's looking for here is the column that the member number is in. So if the member number in your report is in column 1, you want 1 in here. If it's in column 5, then you want column 5. Now, obviously, if you're doing it based on an age, when you run this report, it'll always ask you, base the age on what date? Today's date or a future date? Because usually something like this, if the dues are billed annually, I don't necessarily want people who are going to be 25 now. It's going to be 25, say, as of December 1st. So you can do that. Basically, once you run the report, you go into the member status or the member category, and it'll ask you which report to use for the changes. So you tell it which report. And then you simply tell it, okay, anyone on that report, I want you to change their status from intermediate to senior or from junior to intermediate. Same with the bill, the fee billings dues. I want you to, anyone on that report, I want you to change anyone on that report that has dues intermediate to dues senior or dues junior to dues intermediate, whatever the change is. The idea, it's basically like a glorified find and replace. You're telling it in the report who to actually look for. And then when you tell it to make the change here, it's basically looking at only the members that were on that report you ran. And then basically says, okay, well, this member on the report, they're already set to senior, so I don't have to do anything. Obviously, you always want to run a preview first before you actually make the changes. And that's it.